Hello, spirits and souls of the internet. Welcome back. Last time, I went over all the materials you can gather in the Stone Age and what building blocks you can make using those materials. This time, I will go over the actual buildings you can construct. Now, there are a wide variety of shapes, styles, and patterns that you can use for building in the Stone Age. You can do everything from simple square structures to A-frames, circular buildings, and even larger, more complex structures with varying sizes and shapes all interconnected. But whatever you build, the most important thing is that you are happy with it. It's also important to note that any shape building can be given some variation by simply changing up the materials used to construct it. Now, I could try and go over every single possible building structure there is, but that would be a very long video. Instead, we will keep things simple, and I will go over a few variations that you can construct at the beginning of your game. The first will be a very small, mostly dirt shack. Then we'll do an A-frame with a bit of extra variation just for fun. And lastly, we will do a raised structure. Because after all, you want to be safe in the game, and one of the best ways to stay away from potentially dangerous mobs is to raise your starter home off the ground. Now, let's gather our materials. This time around, I am not going to worry about things such as block patterns or changing up the texture palette. I will simply grab a block and use it to construct the building. The first building I will make is the absolute smallest structure that you can make in the game. Naturally, this means that you will only have enough room for a bed. This essentially puts it so that you are making a 4x3 home. An extra way to make it even simpler still is to not worry about things like overhanging the roof. It will be a very, very basic block structure. And there we go. It is done. The most basic house you can potentially make without digging into the ground or turning a cave into your home. It has no windows, but if you wanted to, you could simply punch out a couple of blocks and make windows. This makes the space feel just a little less cramped. Next, let's do the A-frame. We're going to need a few more blocks for this. Some of the most common blocks you can find are pine, birch, and maple. Depending on where you are in the world, you might also find things such as cypress and redwood. But that'll depend on where you decided to start your world. You can also decide that instead of blocks like these, you want to use the wattle. For now, I'm going to grab a bit of oak, just to be fancy, and a bit of stone. Now, let's see what we can make for an A-frame. A-frames are very, very simple because they basically come to the ground. The only thing you have to worry about is how much space do you think you'll need, and do you want there to be an overhang? This time around, I'm going to say yes, we want an overhang. But we're still going to keep it very, very small. But unlike the other house, we're going to add a little more variation. By that, I mean we're going to have the roof come out to the side just a bit. And we're going to need an extra block to make that happen. Now, the reason I'm having it come out to the side is simply so we can add windows right here. Of course, to properly add windows, we'll need to have a space to actually put them. Now, from here, the next step, we need to have a space there and there. And from here, let's see, this piece can go there. And let's say this is where we're putting the door. Well, the house is quite small now. In fact, I think you'll barely be able to fit a bed in here. But that's okay. The important thing is it will look nice. Now, the next part... Nope, that opens the door. That's not what we want. Let's put a temporary block here. That way, we can come across like this. Now that I'm seeing it in play, I'm thinking we actually want a block there, and then one there. Yes, that looks much better. Sometimes when building, you need to be willing to experiment just a little. The next step, pull out a block there, bring a couple over here, and have one there. Then we lay down the ground blocks. We can have another window in the back, right there. And then we need to worry about these inner blocks. We'd need one like that, and one like that. After which, we have one going this way, one going this way, and a couple windows in like that. And there we have a lovely little A-frame with a little extra shape on top that is just barely big enough for a single bed. Of course, you could make this bigger by simply making it wider. After all, a larger A-frame will be able to fit a lot more than just a bed. For example, this one has enough room for a bit more storage. And because we used quartz windows instead of wattle fences or any other type of fence, we can actually use this space underneath without having to worry about there being gaps and openings. Now, what other structure can we make? Well, there's the raised structure, of course. After all, one of the biggest problems when you're starting out is that mobs might get into your home. And one of the issues with an A-frame like this is even if you were to put a fence to block off your yard, it doesn't do much when the mobs can simply climb up your roof to get into your front yard. But a smaller building like this, well, it's a lot easier to set up a fence and block them off permanently. Now, just because you decide to have a raised structure doesn't mean that mobs won't be able to get into your home. After all, if you don't light it properly, they'll still find a way in. It also doesn't mean that you can't set up a fence of some kind all around the structure. In fact, you can turn your bottom floor into a storage or work area simply by keeping it open and putting a fence around the area. From here, you'll have to decide what sort of flooring you want to do. You can keep it simple and turn the floor into exactly the same block. I personally like to leave a little overhang. You can even change it up with a bit of patterning if you want, having a couple blocks going one way and a couple going another. Of course, I don't want to keep the exact same material for the walls as the floor. It looks better if you can add a bit of variation anyway. And while you could put windows on all sides, I like to keep it to just a couple key areas. I also like to add a bit of extra shape to the roof. I also like to add a railing, just to keep it interesting. Now, lastly, the roof. I gave it a triangle shape, but now I'm not sure that's what I want to go for. Then again, it's already here. I might as well play with it. The thing about roof pieces is they are very directional. Whatever direction you're facing in, that is how they will be placed. It won't matter what part of the block you click on. That is the direction they will go. You quite literally have to turn your whole body around to get it to place in a different way. That's simply how it is. Even if you're facing from above, they do not auto-orient to wherever they were, which on one hand gives you more control over the placement. On the other hand, it can be quite annoying. There we go. 3 very, very simple starter houses. One that uses the least amount of materials. One that uses slightly more materials to look just a little nicer, but doesn't actually have any additional room inside. And one that has just a little extra room on the interior, but is otherwise not much bigger than the others, even if it does use more material to simply raise itself off the ground. Now, I have built a wide variety of structures while playing around with the different styles of building that can be made in the Stone Age of Vintage Story. If any of these structures are something you're interested in seeing built, or if there's a type of building you don't see here, but you're interested in how it might be constructed using only materials from the Stone Age, please let me know, and I will do my best to cover them in a future video. Until then, thank you for watching, and remember, take care of yourself.